People always say that life can change in an instant. I never believed that until it happened to me. My name is Jordan Collins, and I'm 28 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon, where I work as a freelance photographer. It's not the most stable career, but I love it. There's something magical about capturing a single moment in time, freezing it forever. Let me tell you about the night that changed everything. It was a cold October evening, and I had just finished a photography job down by the waterfront. I was tired, my hands were freezing, and all I wanted was to get home, make some hot chocolate, and review the photos I'd taken. The streets were quiet that night. Most people were already home, probably sitting by their fireplaces or watching TV with their families. I was driving my old Toyota, the one with the slightly broken heater and the coffee stain on the passenger seat that never quite came out. My camera bags were piled in the back seat, along with my tripod and all my equipment. I wasn't really paying attention to my speed. My mind was wandering, thinking about the shots I'd captured of the river, the way the city lights danced on the dark water. Then I saw them, those flashing red and blue lights in my rearview mirror. My heart sank. I quickly glanced at my speedometer and realized I'd been going way over the limit without even noticing. I cursed under my breath and pulled over to the side of the road, already calculating how much this ticket was going to cost me. Money was tight that month, and a speeding ticket was the last thing I needed. I watched in my side mirror as a figure stepped out of the patrol car. The beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness as footsteps approached my window. I rolled it down, the cold air rushing in, and reached for my wallet. "License and registration, please." The voice was deep and calm, and when I looked up, I completely forgot what I was doing. The officer standing at my window was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She was tall, with dark skin that seemed to glow even in the dim streetlight. Her eyes were the deepest brown I'd ever seen, and there was something about the way she looked at me that made my stomach flip. Her name tag read, Officer Riley Martinez. "Of course," I managed to say, trying not to sound as flustered as I felt. I handed her my documents, and when our fingers touched briefly, I felt this strange electricity run through me. It sounds silly now, but in that moment, something shifted. Officer Martinez looked at my license, then shined her flashlight into my back seat. "That's a lot of camera equipment," she said, and I thought I detected a hint of curiosity in her voice. "What do you do?" "I'm a photographer," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "I was just doing a shoot down by the waterfront, taking pictures of the city at night." Something changed in her expression. Her face softened, became less official. "Professional?" she asked. "Freelance," I said. "I do mostly landscapes and city photography. Some events too, whatever pays the bills." She nodded slowly, then walked back to her patrol car with my information. I sat there in the cold, watching her in my mirrors. She had this confident way of moving, strong and sure of herself. I caught myself staring and had to look away. This was ridiculous. She was a police officer doing her job, and I was about to get an expensive ticket. There was no reason for my heart to be racing like this. When Officer Martinez came back, she seemed different. More relaxed, less formal. She handed me back my documents and said, "I'm going to let you off with a warning this time, Ms. Collins. But please, watch your speed. These roads can be dangerous at night." "Thank you so much, Officer Martinez," I said, relief flooding through me. "I really appreciate it." She hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Those photos you took of the waterfront, do you have any you could show me?" I was surprised, but also pleased. "Sure, absolutely." I reached for my camera and turned it on, scrolling to the photos I'd taken that evening. Officer Martinez leaned down closer to my window to see the small screen, and suddenly I could smell her perfume. It was subtle, something warm and woody, and it made my head spin. As I showed her the photos, she asked intelligent questions about lighting and composition. She seemed genuinely interested, not just making small talk. "You have a real talent," she said finally, straightening up. "There's something peaceful about these night shots. Like you're showing people a side of the city they never notice." "That's exactly what I'm trying to do," I said, surprised that she understood. "I love capturing the quiet moments, the ones people usually miss." She stood there for a moment, and I got the feeling she didn't want to leave. Honestly, I didn't want her to go either. Finally, she cleared her throat and said, "Well, drive safely, Miss Collins. And maybe slow down a little. You might catch even more of those quiet moments that way." I smiled. "I will. Thank you again, Officer Martinez." As I drove away, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel, and it wasn't from the cold. I couldn't stop thinking about her. Those deep brown eyes, the way she leaned in close to look at my photos, the genuine interest in her voice when she talked about my work. But I pushed those thoughts away. She was just being nice, I told myself. Just a friendly police officer doing her job. Nothing could ever come of it. We were from different worlds. I had no idea how wrong I was. 3 days passed, and I couldn't get Officer Martinez out of my mind. I kept thinking about that traffic stop, replaying every moment in my head. The way she looked at my photos, the sound of her voice, that brief moment when our fingers touched. I felt like a teenager with a crush, and it was driving me crazy. I decided to go back to the waterfront, to the same spot where I'd been shooting that night. This time I wanted to capture the sunset instead of the darkness. Maybe if I focused on my work, I could stop thinking about her. I was setting up my tripod, adjusting the legs on the uneven ground, when I heard a voice behind me that made me jump. "We meet again, Miss Collins." I spun around, and there she was. Officer Martinez, but this time she wasn't in uniform. She was wearing jeans and a simple black jacket, and somehow she looked even more beautiful than before. My heart started racing all over again. "Officer Martinez," I said, trying to sound casual even though I felt anything but. "Riley," she corrected with a small smile. "I'm off duty. You can call me Jordan." We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, and I felt that same electricity I'd felt during the traffic stop. "What brings you here?" I finally asked. "I patrol this area a lot," Riley said, moving closer to where I was setting up. "After seeing your photos the other night, I guess I was hoping I might run into you again." My breath caught in my throat. Had she been looking for me? The thought made my pulse quicken. "The light's better at sunset," I explained, gesturing toward the sky where the sun was starting to dip lower. "Though these clouds might ruin everything. Mind if I stay and watch?" Riley asked. "I've always wanted to learn more about photography." "Not at all," I said, probably too quickly. "I'd love the company." For the next hour, we stood together by the water. I explained different camera settings, talked about composition and lighting, showed her how to frame a shot. Riley was a good student, asking thoughtful questions and really listening to my answers. But more than that, she stood close to me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her body, close enough that our arms occasionally brushed against each other. As the sun finally broke through the clouds, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, I glanced over and caught Riley watching me instead of the sunset. "What?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You get this look when you're concentrating," she said softly. "It's beautiful." Our eyes met, and in that moment, the whole world seemed to stop. I felt like I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't think. All I could do was stand there, drowning in those deep brown eyes. Then her phone buzzed, breaking the spell. "Damn," she muttered, checking the message. "I have to go. Family dinner." "But..." She hesitated, then pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. "If you ever want to give photography lessons, call me. That's my personal number." After she left, I stood there holding her card, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept looking at that card, debating whether to text her. What if I was reading too much into this? What if she just wanted photography lessons and nothing more? Finally, around midnight, I gave in. I typed out a message. "Thanks for keeping me company today." The sunset shots turned out amazing. "Jordan." To my surprise, she responded almost immediately. "Glad I could help. When's your next shoot?" We texted back and forth for hours. She told me about growing up in a family of police officers, about how she'd originally wanted to be an artist, but felt pressured to join the force. I shared stories about leaving my corporate job to pursue photography, about the struggle to make ends meet, but loving what I do. The next week, we met for coffee. Then lunch. Then coffee again. Each time, the conversation flowed easily, like we'd known each other for years instead of weeks. Each time, I felt myself falling a little bit harder. Our photography lessons became a regular thing. Every weekend, we'd meet at different spots around Portland. Sometimes we actually took photos. But more often, we just talked. She'd tell me about difficult calls she'd responded to, and I'd listen, offering what comfort I could. I'd share my fears about money and career stability, and she'd encourage me, believing in my talent even when I doubted myself. One evening, about a month after that first traffic stop, we were at the top of Council Crest, overlooking the city. The air was crisp and cold, and Riley had brought us both hot chocolate. We sat on a bench, our shoulders touching, watching the lights of Portland spread out below us. "Can I ask you something?" I said, gathering my courage. "Anything," Riley replied. "Why did you really pull me over that night?" She laughed, looking a little embarrassed. "You were speeding. But honestly, I'd noticed you at that waterfront spot before. Several times, actually. I was curious about what you were doing out there so late." "You were watching me?" I asked, surprised. "Maybe," she admitted. "There aren't many people out taking photos at 11 p.m. You caught my attention." The way she looked at me when she said it made my whole body feel warm despite the cold air. We were sitting so close, our thighs pressed together, our faces just inches apart. "Riley," I said softly, "what are we doing here?" She turned to face me fully, and the intensity in her eyes took my breath away. "I think you know." "It's complicated," I whispered. "You're a cop, and I'm just a photographer." "You're not just anything," Riley said firmly. "And yes, it's complicated. My job, my family, the fact that I'm not out at work. But Jordan, I can't stop thinking about you." Before I could respond, she leaned in and kissed me. Her lips were soft and warm, and the kiss was gentle at first, then deeper, more urgent. I melted into it, my hands coming up to cup her face, feeling like every cell in my body was on fire. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. "I've wanted to do that since the night I pulled you over," Riley confessed. "Me too," I whispered, and then I kissed her again. That night changed everything between us. After that kiss on Council Crest, Riley and I started seeing each other properly. But it wasn't simple. It wasn't easy. We couldn't just be a normal couple, going out to dinner or holding hands in public. Riley wasn't out at work, and even though the police department had policies against discrimination, she told me there were still plenty of old-school cops who made life difficult for anyone who was different. So we hid. We became experts at sneaking around. Riley would come to my apartment after her shifts, always parking her car a block away so nobody would see it. We'd meet at coffee shops in different neighborhoods, places where we were unlikely to run into anyone she knew. Sometimes we'd drive to small towns outside Portland, just so we could have dinner together without constantly looking over our shoulders. I won't lie to you. The secrecy was hard. Really hard. There were times when I wanted to scream, wanted to tell the whole world that I was in love with this incredible woman. But I couldn't because I loved Riley more than I hated the hiding. And I could see what it was costing her, the stress of maintaining this double life. Despite everything, we were happy. Riley was everything I'd never known I wanted. She was strong but gentle, serious about her work but playful when we were alone. She made me laugh like nobody else could. She'd bring me coffee during my shoots, showing up in her patrol car with a grin on her face. We'd steal quick kisses when nobody was watching, these little moments of joy in the middle of our complicated situation. About 4 months into our relationship, everything almost fell apart. Riley showed up at my apartment one night looking terrified. I'd never seen her like that before, and it scared me. "What's wrong?" I asked as soon as I opened the door. "Chin," she said, pacing my living room like a caged animal. "My partner. She asked about you today. She saw us having coffee last week." My stomach dropped. "What did you tell her?" "I said you were teaching me photography," Riley said, running her hands through her hair. "But Jordan," she didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. "She knows something's going on." I moved to her, putting my hands on her shoulders to stop her pacing. Hey, look at me. Whatever happens, we'll deal with it together. Riley pulled me into a tight hug, holding on like I was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. I'm not ashamed of us, she whispered against my hair. I need you to know that. I'm not ashamed of you, of us, of what we have. I'm just scared of everything changing. I know, I said softly. I know. The next few weeks were terrible. Riley became paranoid, constantly worried that someone was watching us. She'd cancel plans at the last minute, too afraid to risk being seen together. I could see the stress eating away at her, and there was nothing I could do to help. Then came the night that almost broke us. I was driving home from a wedding I'd photographed, exhausted and looking forward to seeing Riley. Suddenly, I saw those familiar flashing lights in my rearview mirror. It was Riley's patrol car. At first, I was confused. We hadn't planned to meet that night. But as I pulled over, I saw the tension in her movements and knew something was wrong. She approached my window in full cop mode. License and registration, please. I played along, handing over my documents. But when she leaned down to take them, I could see the fear in her eyes. Step out of the car, please, she said, and her voice was shaking slightly. Once I was out, standing in the rain, she led me to the space between our cars where we couldn't be seen. Chen is following me tonight, Riley whispered urgently. She's been watching my routes, and I panicked when I saw your car. I had to make this look real. Standing there in the rain, maintaining a professional distance from the woman I loved while she pretended to question me, something inside me cracked. This wasn't sustainable. We couldn't keep living like this. After she let me go, I drove home and cried. Really cried for the first time since this whole thing started. I didn't know what to do. I loved Riley so much, but I didn't know if love was enough. Later that night, she texted me, "Please come over." I found her still in her wet uniform, pacing her apartment. As soon as I walked in, she pulled me into a desperate kiss. "I can't do this anymore," she said when we finally broke apart. Hiding, pretending, watching every word I say. It's killing me. What are you saying? I asked, fear creeping into my voice. Riley took a deep breath. I'm saying I want to stop hiding. I love you, Jordan, and I'm tired of acting like you don't mean everything to me. My heart soared at her words, even as worry twisted in my stomach. Are you sure? What about your job? Your family? My job has anti-discrimination policies, she said firmly. And my family, they'll either accept it or they won't. But I can't build a life with you if I'm living in shadows. You deserve better than that. We deserve better. That night marked a turning point for us. Riley made a decision, and I watched as she slowly started coming out to the people in her life. First was Chun, her partner, who surprised us both by being completely supportive. Girl, I've known for months. Chun laughed when Riley finally told her. I was just waiting for you to trust me enough to say it. Then came Riley's younger brother, Marcus, who hugged her tight and immediately asked to meet me. Her parents were harder. Riley's father was a retired police captain, and he'd always had traditional views about things. But her mother, after the initial shock, became one of our biggest supporters. Watching Riley come out was like watching someone emerge from a dark room into sunlight. She stood taller, smiled more easily, seemed lighter somehow. And as she became more herself, our relationship grew stronger. We could finally breathe, finally be ourselves, finally love each other the way we deserved to be loved. As winter settled over Portland, everything changed for Riley and me. No longer hiding, no longer sneaking around. We could finally experience what it was like to be a normal couple. And let me tell you, it was amazing. Riley started keeping clothes at my apartment. Just small things at first, a toothbrush, a change of clothes for after her shifts. But gradually, my space became our space. Her uniform hanging in my closet, her coffee mug next to mine in the kitchen. The little everyday intimacies that couples take for granted, but that had seemed impossible for us just months before. We went on real dates. Dinner at restaurants where we didn't have to sit in the darkest corner. Movies where we could hold hands without worrying who might see. walks through the city where we could be ourselves, just two people in love. One snowy evening in December, we were walking through Washington Park, our hands clasped together. The snow was falling softly, covering everything in white, and the world felt magical and quiet. Riley suddenly stopped walking and turned to look at me. "Do you remember when we used to do this separately?" she asked, gesturing to our joined hands. "Always keeping distance, always looking over our shoulders?" I squeezed her hand. "Feels like a different lifetime." "I want to show you something," she said, and there was something in her voice that made my heart beat faster. She led me to a familiar spot, and I realized it was near the waterfront, close to where I'd been shooting photos that first night. As we approached, I saw a small group of people waiting there. Chun, Riley's partner, Marcus, her brother, and Riley's parents. I was confused and a little scared. "Riley, what's going on?" She positioned me exactly where I'd stood with my camera that first night, then took both my hands in hers. In the glow of the streetlights, with snow falling around us, she started to speak. "Jordan," she began, and I noticed her voice was shaking. "This is where I first saw you. Months before I ever pulled you over. You were here with your camera, completely absorbed in your work, and something about you just caught my attention. I drove past this spot every night after that, hoping to see you again." My eyes were starting to fill with tears. I knew what was coming, but I couldn't quite believe it was real. Riley dropped to one knee in the snow and pulled out a small box. "You changed my life, Jordan Collins. You helped me find the courage to be myself, to live honestly. Every day with you makes me want to be better. Will you marry me?" Through my tears, I looked at her kneeling in the snow, this brave, beautiful woman who had risked so much for us. Behind her, I could see her mother crying, her father trying to hide his own emotions, Chin grinning broadly, and Marcus filming everything on his phone. "Yes," I managed to say, my voice breaking. "Yes, absolutely yes." Riley stood and slipped the ring onto my finger, then kissed me as snow fell around us and cheers erupted from our small audience. The kiss tasted of tears and joy and promise and hope. Later that night, at our favorite restaurant where Riley had arranged a celebration dinner, her father pulled me aside. He was a big man, intimidating in the way that retired police captains often are, and I'll admit I was nervous. "Jordan," he said, his voice gruff, "I want you to know something. When Riley first told us about you, about the two of you, I struggled with it. Not because you're two women, but because being married to a cop isn't easy. There's worry, fear, late nights. The job takes a toll." He paused, and I waited, my heart in my throat. "But watching my daughter these past months," he continued, "seeing how happy you make her, how you've helped her become more herself. Well, I just wanted to say welcome to the family." I couldn't speak. I just hugged him, this man who could have rejected us, but chose love instead. As spring arrived, we started planning our wedding. We decided to keep it small and intimate, just close friends and family, and to hold it at the waterfront where we'd spent so many evenings together. Riley's precinct had been surprisingly supportive, with many of her fellow officers offering to help with security and arrangements. The day before our wedding, Riley and I returned to the spot where she'd first pulled me over. It had become a ritual for us, visiting the places that marked important moments in our relationship. "Hard to believe it all started with a speeding ticket," I said, leaning against her patrol car. She was in uniform, having just finished her shift. "Technically, you never got that ticket," Riley grinned, pulling me close despite the fact that we were on a public street. I was too distracted by the cute photographer with all the camera equipment. "Officer Martinez," I teased, using her last name the way I had that first night. "Are you admitting to not doing your job properly?" "I'd say it was more like excellent community relations," she laughed, and kissed me right there on the street where it all began. The next day was perfect. We got married under a clear blue sky, surrounded by everyone we loved. Chun was Riley's maid of honor, and she gave a speech that had everyone laughing about how terrible we were at hiding our relationship in the early days. Riley's father surprised us by organizing an honor guard of police officers for our ceremony exit. As we walked through the line of raised batons, I saw tears streaming down Riley's face. I never thought I could have this, she whispered to me. All of it. Being out, being happy, being married to the woman I love, with my whole family here supporting us. I squeezed her hand. You deserve this. We deserve this. Our honeymoon was a photography tour through the Pacific Northwest. Riley had insisted on combining our vacation with my passion for photography. We spent 3 weeks capturing stunning landscapes, from the rocky Oregon coast to the mountains of Washington. Riley's photography had improved dramatically since our first lessons, and we had fun comparing our different styles and perspectives on the same scenes. When we returned home, we moved into a new apartment with a view of the river. Riley continued her police work, now openly wearing her wedding ring on duty. I expanded my photography business, taking on bigger clients and more ambitious projects. Sometimes she'd stop by my shoots in her patrol car, bringing me coffee and stealing quick kisses when she thought nobody was watching. Life wasn't perfect. We still had challenges, moments of doubt, difficult days. But we faced them together, and that made all the difference. 1 year after our wedding, I had my first major gallery showing. It was a big deal for me, the kind of opportunity I'd been working toward my entire career. The gallery was in downtown Portland, a beautiful space with white walls and perfect lighting. The show was called Night Patrol, and it was a series of photographs capturing the quiet moments of city life. Many of the photos featured Riley in various locations around Portland, on her patrol routes, at the waterfront, on the streets where we'd fallen in love. The final image in the series was the one that started it all, the waterfront at night, with police lights reflecting off the dark water. The night of the opening, I was incredibly nervous. This was my work, my heart, laid bare for everyone to see. But Riley stood beside me in her dress uniform, looking proud and beautiful, and her presence gave me courage. As people moved through the gallery, I watched them stop at each photo, reading the small descriptions I'd written. They were simple captions, just a few words about each moment captured. But together, they told our story. You're quiet, Riley said, coming up behind me and wrapping her arms around my waist. What are you thinking about? Just how far we've come, I said, leaning back against her. From that first traffic stop to here. Sometimes it doesn't feel real. It's real, she whispered in my ear. We're real. Riley's parents came to the opening, along with Marcus and Chun and so many other people who had supported us along the way. Watching Riley's father stand in front of a photo of his daughter in uniform, studying it with pride in his eyes, brought tears to mine. But the moment that meant the most came toward the end of the evening. An elderly woman approached us, looking at Riley's uniform and then at the photos on the walls. Are you the officer in these pictures? She asked Riley. Yes, ma'am, Riley replied. The woman smiled warmly. My granddaughter is gay, she said. She's 16 and terrified to tell her parents. But I'm going to bring her here to see this. I want her to know that love is possible, that happy endings are real. Thank you for being visible. Thank you for being brave. After she walked away, Riley turned to me with tears in her eyes. That's what it's all about, she said. That's why it matters that we didn't hide. The gallery show was a success. I sold several pieces, and more importantly, I got commissions for new projects. My career was finally taking off in the way I'd always dreamed. But none of it would have meant anything without Riley by my side. A few months later, Riley came home with big news. She'd been promoted to sergeant. It was a huge step in her career, recognition of her years of hard work and dedication. We celebrated that night with champagne and takeout, sitting on our apartment floor like we'd done so many times before. You know what's funny? Riley said, looking at me across the scattered boxes of Chinese food. When I pulled you over that night, I was just a patrol officer doing a routine traffic stop. I never imagined it would lead to all of this. Best traffic stop ever, I said, echoing the words she'd used on our wedding day. Best decision I ever made, she corrected, reaching for my hand. As we sat there, I thought about that scared woman who'd been so terrified of being herself, of losing everything if people knew who she really was. And I looked at the confident sergeant sitting across from me, who wore her wedding ring proudly and lived her truth every single day. We continued our photography adventures together. Riley had become quite skilled with a camera, though she always insisted she'd never be as good as me. We'd wake up early on weekends to catch the sunrise, or stay out late to photograph the stars. Those moments, just the two of us and our cameras, became some of my favorite times. Sometimes, late at night, Riley would get called out on emergency calls. I'd wake up to find her side of the bed empty, and I'd worry until I heard her key in the lock, signaling she was home safe. It was the hardest part of being married to a cop. But Riley always came back to me, and every time she did, I was reminded of how lucky we were to have found each other. On our second anniversary, we went back to that spot by the waterfront where it all began. We set up our cameras side by side, just like we'd done so many times before. But this time, we also set up a timer and took photos of ourselves, laughing, kissing, just being together. Do you ever regret it? I asked Riley as the sun started to set. Coming out, all the stress it caused, the difficulties? She looked at me like I was crazy. Regret being able to love you openly? Regret being myself? Never, Jordan. Not for a single second. Even on the hard days? Especially on the hard days, she said firmly. Because on those days, I get to come home to you. That makes everything worth it. As we packed up our equipment that evening, a young patrol officer approached us. She looked nervous, glancing between Riley's sergeant stripes and our camera equipment. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Sergeant Martinez?" "I am," Riley said, smiling encouragingly. "I just wanted to say." The young officer paused, gathering courage. "I saw your partner's gallery show, the Night Patrol series. It meant a lot to me. I'm not out yet at work, and seeing that there are people like you, people who made it work, it gives me hope." Riley put a hand on the young woman's shoulder. "It gets easier," she told her. "Not easy, maybe, but easier. And it's worth it. Living your truth is always worth it." After the officer left, Riley turned to me with that smile I loved so much, the one that still made my heart skip a beat after all this time. "You know what's amazing?" she said. "We're not just living our own story anymore. We're showing other people that their stories can have happy endings too." And that, I realized, was the real magic of what we'd found together. Not just our own happiness, but the hope we could give to others. The proof that love could win, that courage could be rewarded, that sometimes taking a risk on someone could change your entire life. As we drove home that evening, past the spot where Riley had first pulled me over, I thought about all the moments that had led us here. The scared conversations, the stolen kisses, the tears and fears and joy. Every single moment had been worth it. People always say that love finds you when you least expect it. I used to think that was just something people said, a cliché that didn't mean anything real. But now I know it's true. Love found me on a quiet street at midnight, with red and blue lights flashing in my rearview mirror. It found me in the deep brown eyes of a police officer who was brave enough to be herself. It found me in a moment that could have been just another forgotten traffic stop, but instead became the beginning of everything. Sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. You just have to be brave enough to recognize them when they arrive, and courageous enough to hold on to them once you find them. That's what Riley taught me. That's what we learned together. And every day, I'm grateful for that speeding ticket I never actually received, because it gave me everything I never knew I needed. Our story isn't extraordinary because we're special people. It's extraordinary because we chose love over fear, truth over hiding, and each other over everything else. And in the end, that's what makes any love story worth telling. This is our story. This is how a simple traffic stop changed 2 lives forever. And I wouldn't change a single moment of it.